Thank you, Presiding Officer. As anybody who took part in Stage 2 knows, I have been really keen to see data collection strengthened. So often we find ourselves in this Parliament, and similar situations take place in councils across Scotland as well, debating private rented sector policy using data that's been scraped from Zoopla or estimated by people on either side of the debate, meaning that data naturally differs wildly. This serves nobody, and we end up taking positions based on anecdotes and guesses when the information is out there to be captured. What are people charging tenants, and for what kind of property? I strongly believe that an accurate picture of this will lead to better policy and greater confidence in decisions that are taken, whether you agree with them or not. There are examples in the debates around this very bill. I know that from Scottish Land and Estates there are concerns out there about the system of rent caps not taking into account these private landlords in rural areas who've protected their tenants over many years and are now renting below market rate. I don't know how common that is, and we will never know if we don't ask and require answers to be given. We also don't know the full scale of exorbitant rent rates that do exist. We usually only know of them once they're challenged. My Amendment 149 would allow Scottish ministers to set up a process through regulations requiring landlords to provide information about their property or tenancy, either to ministers or to the local authority. Unlike the existing powers in the bill, this would make it an ongoing duty for landlords, rather than being instigated by a request by Scottish ministers or the Council. Now, this requirement to provide the same information could not be imposed more than once a year, regardless of who is asking. The amendment outlines what the regulations could cover, such as when and how information is provided, how it is used and shared, and how the process is enforced, including an appeals process. This approach would give clarity about what is expected of landlords and reduce the need for repeated requests from government and therefore repeated answers from landlords. However, I recognise that this would be a significant new responsibility for landlords and could require more resources from government to manage the returns, which is why my more specific amendments at Stage 2 were rejected. That is why I've brought this forward as a regulation-making power, which could be used if considered necessary and after engagement with those affected. My consequential Amendment 262 would ensure that any regulations made under this section are subject to the affirmative procedure, so Parliament has the opportunity to scrutinise them fully. Now, I suspect Edward Mountain would have disagreed with my initial proposals, just as Government did, but I hope that provides him with the reassurance that he was looking for. I'm happy to take an intervention.
Graham Simpson.
I thank Emma Roddick for taking the intervention. I've just got one question. I wasn't sure about this amendment, but I'm quite taken by it now. As I said, I can change my mind. My question is, has Emma Roddick liaised with the Scottish Association of Landlords on this, and what's their view?
Emma Roddick.
I don't believe I've had correspondence with them specifically, but certainly during Stage 2 on much more forceful amendments that I had lodged at that point. There were landlord and tenant roundtables taking place in the Parliament, and there was widespread support from both sides. Even back then, with very different amendments on data collection, pretty much everyone was agreed that the current system where we are guessing and people are having to put forward views, and it's difficult for government to uphold the decisions it's made. It's also difficult for people to challenge them when there isn't the data out there to back up either side of the argument. So I am grateful to... Certainly.
Edward Mountain.
Presiding Officer, I'd like to thank the member for taking the intervention, and of course the member is right and has correctly construed that I would not have supported her amendment when it was at committee stage. I just want to get an indication from you where you're going with this. Are you expecting it's something that, or is the member, sorry, Presiding Officer, I'll correct myself before you do, is the member looking to do this on an annual basis? Is it on every few years? Is there a standard form? I'm looking for some guidance which she would be expecting the government to follow when they were collecting this data. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Emma Roddick.
It's a tough question because I'm not the government and I don't know what government's going to do with this. But my hope would certainly be that we look at situations and localities where we can get a good picture of what is going on across the country by collecting this data. I imagine that depending on the purpose and the reason for needing that data, that it would be best to have it as an annual, at least for a few years, to get that body of evidence. But like I say, it would depend, and I think the important part here is that this is going to be open for consultation, engagement and, importantly, parliamentary scrutiny. So I am grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for discussing this over the summer and reaching this position that gives ministers the power to, in future, design a process to collect better data. And I would encourage members across the chamber to support my amendments and then to please do what they can to ensure that this results down the line in real positive change in the data that we, government, landlords, lobby groups can rely on when making better law and policy in future. Because regardless of policy disagreements, we can surely agree that we need to have solid data and evidence backing up the decisions that we make. Thank you.